Hi everyone, welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Khoi Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and tonight I am very excited. I'm so excited, more than I can tell you, to welcome Diana Khoi Nguyen and Cindy Juyoung Oak to celebrate the release of their collections Root Fractures and Ward Toward. Let's give a hand for each of them. We are going to hear poetry from each of them tonight, but they are also going to be joined tonight in conversation with aracelis girmay. Let's give a hand for this. We have an all-star lineup here this evening, folks, and I'm really glad that you get to see it and hear it. All of this is seating. Don't be afraid to, get close. Also, if second row, if you want to move up behind you, make some room for people on your feet. It's really okay. We're all just getting comfy. We're doing our best. Thank you all for joining us. This is so exciting. Diana, I think we hosted you for Ghost Hour.
I know, that was the launch.
Yeah, which was stunning and so exciting, and I'm so glad to welcome you back this evening. And Cindy, I've been so looking forward to this collection, and I'm glad that we get to be a part of its West Coast journey. That's so exciting. And aracelis, I'm so excited that you're now in the Bay Area, and then we get to welcome you here. It's your first event at Green Apple, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited. You're all here for the first one, folks. Okay. Thank you so kindly for joining us both in person and online. Look, now all of this is free. You can sit down on the foot here.
Right here.
Great. Thank you, Dan Lau.
Didn't know we're getting front row seating.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for letting me razz you a little bit.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us both in person here and online. Hello, online audience. We appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. We are broadcasting from San Francisco, California. We are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, and we hope that you join us in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into action, because what is acknowledgement without action? By donating either your time or monetary means, as I say, to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. For easier access to that, we have a QR code at the back where if you scan it, it will take you directly to the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust website, where you can find out more about this project of rematriation and how you can participate. I have very brief business before we get to the heart of the evening. Now's a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. I would say picture taking is encouraged. Is that okay? Okay, yeah, that's fine. But, why be that guy? You can silence your cell phones. Please do check out our full event calendar on our website. We have a really great season coming up, including the event that you are currently attending. So please do check that out. And poetry folks in particular, I'm just talking about April. We have a really great season ahead of us in the coming months, but just talking about April, we are going to be hosting Armand Davudian's launch for the Palace of 40 Pillars on April 19th. He's right here. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but and he'll be joined by Randall Mann, who we love as well. The restroom is behind me rather. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. If you need to know how to get there, please do ask me, and I'll gladly help you. We have books by all three of the poets joining us tonight at the front register. You can find them there, and would you be willing to sign them afterward? Yay! So you have the opportunity to have them signed. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you also support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, and it can be signed tonight, which what a great opportunity that is. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so kindly. Without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the first poet joining us. Cindy Juyoung Oak is the author of the chapbook Housework from Ugly Duckling Press, with poems in Poetry, The Nation, New England Review, the Iowa Review, and elsewhere. A MacDowell Fellow, she is a Kenyon Review Fellow and teaches poetry writing at Kenyon College. Her collection, Ward Toward, selected by Ray Armentrout for the Yale Younger Poets series, is part of the reason we are here tonight. Let's give another hand for Cindy Juyoung Oak.
Thank you so much all for being here. We're so excited. It's such an honor, and thank you, Car, for hosting us and setting everything up, and aracelis for being in conversation with us. I am going to read a poem that I realized I have to read today because someone texted me today saying, I can't believe your friends gave you lice from this poem. And I remembered it was in Oakland. It was here. Okay, so now you just imagine that story in this poem. You know the setting. It's called Rights. No skin cream is innocent. Not corduroys, no flushable wipes. All objects are made and named and positioned the same way the writers of crossword puzzles make implicit and treacherous assumptions around knowledge. Warding off illness, I continue to live, not knowing how to pronounce cicada, being both settler and character. There are fewer people here I can be mistaken for than anywhere I have lived, a proud and frivolous itemization. Given the power to write the clues for others to cross, mine would be dramatically unrelated to any czar or czar, like 9 or 10 letters uttered to deny the evil eye or the 6-letter mononym of she who does not know her. The left lung is smaller than the right. Oboists practice a circular breath, stored covertly in cheeks, but fans who watch their mouths too closely sometimes faint, not breathing at all instead of invisibly like the performers. 2 friends once gave me lice without our realizing, and after their delicing visit, I passed it back. And we all had to return to the same salon at 9 p.m. Symbols, too, have this contagion, sharing and mediating blame and punishment. As pressure inside reconciles to match the atmosphere, shoulder blades protect the lungs, which are longer than most generally picture, and which stay massaged from the inside by 2 kidneys, one wider by a centimeter. Far from family now, I'm confused not for individuals, but for other groups. I become an index for the unknown, for the invasive, or maybe I am an icon and also a tribute, like an old etching on the underside of a school desk. The mobility of the wrapping ribs guides air, whether the breathing is voluntary, which is typical, or involuntary, in crisis. Accessory muscles like abdominals are at work. These participate, but they never themselves initiate. It is cold to be thin, to know borders between bodies this constantly. Words can too be body, the O of hands and mouths and volumes aspiration, oboe, O, old, O, own. I wake up now and hear, O, or I, O, O. No, I, O, O. The next one has these kind of beds. I was in this kind of hospice ward, nursing home type thing. And in Korea, I think it's different now because of COVID, but they would have these like huge rooms with tons of people. And they would say, I don't know, they had their reasons for this set up, but it's really very weird. It smells, as you can imagine. And when I walked into the room, I was sort of like struggling to find the person I was looking for. It was my grandfather. And so the stanzas sort of syntactically can be read in different orders that your eyes would move and make sense. I'm going to pick one, and then, you can choose your own adventure maybe after. It's called A Homeward. Where was I to look? Patients laid along both long walls. There were nurses scattered, weaving tubes out of his long arm, white gauze wrapped so taut he could not lift his hand. Walking down the skinny plots, my breath held to avoid their contents, slow molding. I had not had to search for his hand. Their theory, our elders are less lonely in these rooms of sweat and whimpers. I dream of, through the patients, my Weharabaji's arms tied to each side of his small bed to prevent pulling of small halls created by the elderly bodies. Any bed might have been his. My eyes tossed well between that face, the smile that declares. His 2 detained liabilities were so thin to me. A stranger holding him for the first time, months later, silhouette body filled again, strong and smiling as we clutch. In months he would be dead in every way, but I would not fly out because of my school schedule, the cost of travel. Across the northern border, his other descendants picture him at 30. Father, frozen. So a couple nights ago, I was talking to someone about Korean fan death. And the fear of fans, which I have subconsciously kind of taken in, and I don't like to sleep with fans on and things like that. And it's also, I think it's especially for kids. Anyway, So that reminded me of this poem that, again, it could be read multiple ways. But I think I'm just going to read top to bottom. That is about these kind of traditions of luck that we hold and what we do with them. Called Residue Guidelines. You might recognize some. I was told not to shake my foot that way. The luck leaks out your restless limbs. So could you sit more glassily and not leave the pillows upright, another hollow place to ward away your fortune? I feared young dying, hating to waste. But lately, when I cough or clot blood, I register this potential as past. My age now emblem of having aged. Nothing to be envious of, nothing to revere. I survived past fulfilling other schemas for decades, and I offer you the grammar of this chance. Keep your hair unwashed to hold its knowledge, and avoid writing your name or anyone's in red, except the dead or those you wish to be dead soon. Nights turn off your fans, collect your toenail clippings, and refuse hums so you dream of persimmons and pigs. And if you have love, then be early, even earlier, to the after-death ceremony, and when you kiss the other grievers as you listen to the chants, force your legs greenly still. It's so funny, like the types of rituals you have that are like this exciting way to control things, that they don't make any sense. Okay, so I'm gonna read one called The Tyranny of Representation, because it mentions California, and I'm very happy to be back here. Even if you counted every song in which the word California appears, and even if you return yourself to your first form, even if you are the friend of your instrument and the marsh of your family, even if you have sliced brains into 120 discs apiece to place them on clear rectangular slides, even if everyone is reasonable after your mom has just died, even if you have twirled at every rest stop, paid the price of the present, recognized shame as generic, still no event is like blindness, no idea is like prison, even if you promise you describe last night's little dream, even if you study and consider the conditions of planthood and metaphor, no, dying is not like death, and not even life is lifelike. There are photographs of small children, laughing in black and white, that people stop and cry at in museums, but ignore in homes. There's a lot of California. It gets in you. This one is from this group of prose poems I wrote, where I took like real things and then sort of just abstracted as much as I could to see kind of what was recognizable, but also like the way in which certain dynamics or histories are true across time and space. And it's called Signs. You might recognize the place. There is an island claimed by two small countries, in a sea whose naming it is also disputed by those countries. One recently occupied the other, which became dependent and furious, and many feelings of disgust and memories of penetration remain. Though it is referred to as an island when it is in the news, which is often in these two countries, a deed found in a newly released government document or an even older map referencing it by its cover name, the island is a group of 2 rocks with ground and many smaller rocks that do not fit humans. Seagulls fly between them in the summer, and their only 2 true residents take a boat. The fisherman and his wife come from the more recently war-torn country where sea levels are rising fastest in the region. The fishing has no heirs, but the lighthouse officials plan to stay past the fisherman, who everyone hears has been going blind. He died. I didn't know. He was already dead when I wrote it, but I didn't know. It was like this real fisherman. I'm gonna read one more poem from when I was teaching in Palestine. It's called Composition of a Raft. And of course, it's nothing like Gaza, but even living in Ramallah, there's checkpoints everywhere, and something can be 10 feet away, a doctor or family member or school, and impossible to get to. So the poem is like in these sort of like blocks, and then again kind of work back and forth since That's kind of been a theme to me. And I'm going to read this one both ways and end on it. It's from 2018. Elsewhere they carried out planned explosions of clay in the earth to pause the wildfires. That summer we were stretching time, wandering past the blockades, telling the myths we kept like keys, and studying loyalty born of attachment, not alignment. They counted hundreds of washed-up dead sea turtles, touching like lovers that summer. We were caging and sifting because comparisons tend to stifle both things, so we leaned, not leaped. We didn't want to want anything that much. It was the longest loss of the moon view for a century that summer. We spent the dream putting everyone back in their places and avoiding spectacle by refusing to play spectator, resisting the humiliation in pieces. That summer we learned to bargain with gods, that exile is always story. We were never remembering to call back or predicting the water supply, despite our knowing how much relief is like panic and promise. Elsewhere they carried out in the earth to pause the wildfires, stretching time, wandering past the myths we kept like keys born of attachment. They counted hundreds of sea turtles, touching like we were caging, and comparisons tend to stifle, so we leaned, not leaped. To want anything that much. It was the longest loss for a century that summer, putting everyone back and avoiding spectacle, spectator, resisting in pieces. That summer we learned that exile is always story, remembering to call back or supply, despite our knowing, like panic, planned explosions of clay. That summer we were the blockades, telling and studying loyalty, not alignment. Washed up dead lovers that summer, sifting because both things we didn't want of the moon view. We spent the dream in their places by refusing to play the humiliation. To bargain with gods, we were never predicting the water. How much relief is in promise. Thanks so much, y'all. It's so nice to see someone with a nice.
Can we give one more hand for Cindy, Juyoung? Thank you so much, Cindy. I'm glad to have you here. And congratulations. I'm delighted to introduce our next poet. Poet and multimedia artist Diana Khoi is the author of Ghost of, which won the Kate Tufts Award and Colorado Book Award. Her work appears in Poetry, American Poetry Review, and elsewhere. A Kundiman Fellow, she teaches in the Randolph College Low Residency MFA and is an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Her new collection, Root Fractures, is part of the reason we're here tonight. Please welcome Diana Khoi.
Hi. It's Monday. I know you came out. I would never. I mean, I would, like, for Cindy. But, you know, like, usually I'm, 9 p.m. I'm asleep. Which is gratitude. Thank you for being here to celebrate. Cindy's official pub day is tomorrow, so today's like, you're still getting it early. Think about that. I feel like that has sexy energy. So really excited just to be in conversation and just to hear and just seeing so many faces from the past like decade of my life. So very much like a kind of homecoming because we have significant ties to the Bay, but also to California. Also, hello to people inside the internet. I know, I'm imagining your silhouettes somewhere. Hopefully comfortable. I'm gonna read a poem that maybe I wrote in my MFA. Yeah. And then I was like, no more. And then I came back to it maybe 15 years later. I don't actually know math, so that could be bad numbers. And I was like, whoa, why am I talking about like white folk variant, European folk variants? You know, like I have no ties to Europe. So I changed it. Sulky, weaning, young. Finding her hide, we trailed fingers down, then against grains of fur, thrusting shoulders into its waxy skin. This is how she found us. The past draped about us like a cloak, hands twisting peach halves from a core. her form in the sound, a pandan leaf peeking through milk. The only seals in Vietnam, American men with green faces. Cape disappointment. Tides withhold as much as they reveal. What is gleaned from film negatives? In lieu of nouns, pronouns, and names, simile. Like a tern circling before its dive plunge, merging bird and shadow with sea. Hunger, like morning, is defined by what neither has. I was like, oh, there's like beach vibes. I didn't mean to, but I also love the beach. I grew up in LA. My high school had a surf team. I don't know how to surf. I want to one day, but that sounds scary. I just go underwater instead. But I got scuba certified, so that, yeah. And then, okay. Can I share like a little mini goal this year? Might learn how to spearfish. Okay, yeah, we can talk about that. Okay. That was just like a weird palate cleanser. Okay, yeah. Also because I'm nervous. It was funny. Not funny. This is wonderful. We were chatting with folks at Berkeley today, this afternoon, and there was a young woman, there was a person, and she pronounced the title of this poem kind of like I did, which is to say it's like a mispronunciation for fluent Vietnamese speakers. And I immediately was like, yes, like you're me, we have this feral relationship to the Vietnamese language. I'm projecting, but just, I felt like a magnet. So the title is Doi Moi. But for a long time, I always thought that phrase was Doi Moi, which means two totally different things, kind of sounds the same, looks the same, DOI, MOI, but then there's all these like squiggly lines that tell you how to change your voice. But what I like is that we have our own relationship in the mishearing, which you don't have to know a foreign language to mishear things, right? And you sit with it for maybe years, over a decade, and it becomes, like the OED eventually adopts cool contemporary words, right? So like in the same way, it's like my own unique Vietnamese, if that makes sense. So when I met that person who also kind of mispronounced it as a phrase, I don't know, yeah, it's like I found somebody who spoke my language. Doi Moi. She watches mainly World War II films, attentive like a sentry, retracing the steps of someone trying to find her way out. Her aging mother sits quietly before her in what my mother refers to as any day now. But why had asked to be closer to her daughters in Southern California. In the early months of post-war Vietnam, my mother pleaded for them to flee, and so the facade of an evening walk, silent, brisk, stopping to recall, paralyzing terror, a frantic hand searching for my mother's to drag her as they moved along half-lit alleys. I'm trying to remember the details, but this is not my memory. The state visited indignities upon the women in my bloodline, that state, this state, and she upon her daughters, and so this line now finds enclosure. In the dark, we cannot know for sure which liquid emerges from the body. And when I ask why World War II, my mother replies, because someone is always running or hiding, and it's black and white. Her birth, her birthing me, both began with a sentence, one which neither of us will survive. The more we find language in this one or another, perhaps the clearer it becomes, the inadequacy of any verbal communication. Even an extreme form of parenting, such as matrophagy, involves a touching. And who makes the first offering? the body for biting, or maw for eating. A silent transfer, by which I mean no one speaks, but music gathers as parent and child move toward each other. What other task exists, if not biological? Love, however defined, must be to ensure a fitness, so who cares if it's conditional? On my wall, I begin to hammer a nail upon which will hang an image of my father, younger than I am now. The vibration of the movement dislodges one of my young mother, and she tumbles out of the glass, the wooden frame fracturing at two joints. It may be easier to replace, but having been taught to avoid waste, I will repair it and hang my child self in her place. I exist to resist the will of another, and so it goes. The poet Sam Berkorfman, they go by S. Berkorfman, said this wonderful thing about prose poems, and I love it, so I'll share it with you, which is, you can't really fathom it when you see it. You have to begin to read it to access it, versus when poems are scattered across the page, you can at least get a feeling, ooh, piecemeal, fragment, or jacket, whatever. And so I actually didn't remember what was in these poems that I was about to read, which is my way of telling you that they were prose poems. And so I had my book launch for the first book here, which is really significant because I do feel very much like San Francisco is a kind of a home. And my grandmother was here. This is when she was alive. And she actually sat, I think where Adrian was sitting. And she wore her pearls. She's totally she may or may not have had a fur coat, which it didn't matter what the weather was, but she dressed up, and I'm just thinking about her now. Yeah, I'm just thinking about those who are no longer here with us. And then also those whom we never got to know. Cape disappointment. Sedge and sea asparagus submerge, reemerge. What happens when the time comes? What happens when the time comes and the tide doesn't? Startled, my mother and I find each other in passing. The robin with mouths to feed reverses just before my window. Isn't it you, mother, looking me in the eye before you strike? My parents were also here with my grandmother and also some of my aunts and uncles, which is wild because I was the child who didn't skip grades and then go to med school. Although I did 1/4 as a neuroscience major, but physics. But I bring that up to say, because family was present, it totally, then I had to censor myself because there's just conversations you don't want to have, right? Nobody was censoring me, but it's just a choice you make emotionally. But they're not here. Maybe they're in there, I don't know, but that's okay. So when my grandmother passed, my mother came home with a photograph. She's one of 10, I think. I can't count, but maybe 10 or 11. And in the photograph are her 2 older brothers, and then she's holding onto one, and then her older sister's holding onto one. It's just, I'm trying to describe it. They're playing tug of war, but instead of rope, they're using their arms. Okay, so you can just kind of imagine that. And it's little kids, they're playing, you're oh, cute. They have the same faces, but they're little people. You know how you can see that. But then I'm wait, this picture means it's in Vietnam. They're that age, so this is during the war. And they're playing tug of war. And so then I had so many, I was oh shit. I think all the time about the scholar Tina Kampf and her book, Listening to Images. And I had that moment where I was I'm feeling the fucking hum of the image striking me in my body. And the arms, how, an embrace. Yeah, anyway, I'll just read it. Okay, and this is the last one, and then we'll chat. This is called Tug. And it's in 3 parts, but you don't need to see the image. It'll make sense when I read and when there's gaps. of a photograph. Bart's studio tells what has happened as it was happening. This one split second back in time. I traveled back in time to return to a place. I've never been to a place which had to exist in order to exist on film. In my mind now, do I see the moment, the stadium, a field, where grass grows far past my mother's young ankle, the rear of an automobile parked beside the boundary of trees. Upon my own childhood, 30 years later, can I map this terrain, the grass, the open field, children's bodies in motion, testing what their bodies are made of, because they can, because it feels good to do so, to strive in this way. 4 bodies, 2 brothers facing off, a sister each at their side. These are the facts of the photograph. The striped shorts, plaid smock, variations on the noses of my grandparents, hair pulled back, hair let down, no uncles, these 2 brothers. I'm both surprised and not surprised to see them as to say the same bodies they wear, which here would seem foreign to aching after surgery, finds the part of her body which its contour previously could not have. The smooth stretches, bumps, small working permit movement. A stranger, as if her dead body in the foot. Bodies dead, and people very much alive as I know them, now and yesterday, in evidence of who will die, but now here in the photograph and present moment they exist. But what strikes me is how they hold each other, which is the way in which they hold themselves, together, securely, so that the grasp does not come loose, 4 hands in contest, held in 2 knots. To embrace is also to secure, which also keeps another's body in place, in time, for the time being, until somebody lets go or breaks free. Is the love of a sibling pure until somebody realizes they hadn't been able to see things all too clearly, and so the fog of the family lifts, but just for a moment, because when your country is at war, you do not have time to consider how to love your brothers cautiously, because it's black and white, isn't it? The photograph, the war, the decision to keep on living, even though you couldn't say why or what for. I cannot speak for my mother or her brothers, or that which had happened, that which will have happened by the time they uncover this photograph, in the country where I was born, where they are parents of children whom they pitted against each other in proxy competition. Here where I belong, I long to hold my hands around my brother's waist. Thank you.
One more hand for Diana. And welcome back. We're going to move into the conversation portion of our evening, which means that I have the pleasure of introducing the final poet who will be joining us as an interlocutor. Aracelis is the author of 3 books of poems, most recently The Black Maria. Girmay is on the editorial board of the African Poetry Book Fund and is the current editor-at-large for BOA's Blessing the Boat selections. For the past few years, she collaborated as editor on the anthology So We Can Know, Writers of Color on Pregnancy, Loss, Abortion, and Birth. Please welcome Aracelis Girmay.
Hi, everybody. Wow. Thank you both so much. It's such an honor to be here and incredible, powerful to get to hear you both.
Oh,
Is that good?
yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to see if I can organize myself. I don't have my glasses, but I think I can see. I just I wanted to ask a couple questions and we'll talk, and then I'll also keep an eye out for hands in a second. But I think I'll begin with my most urgent question. And I was thinking about the first time I read Manu Kapil's Vertical Interrogation of Strangers. For me, it was 16 years ago. And for those who haven't read it, she begins with these 12, to me, really charged, intimate questions to ask of strangers. And one of those questions was, who is responsible for the suffering of your mother? And it wasn't just the suffering and the pain of the question, it was also the assumption that the respondent has a mother who suffered. And kind of immediately that shocked me, but also it shocked me who the mothers were in my, like just reading that for myself before I enter the rest of the book. I suddenly thought of my mom's grandfather as one of the mothers. And then the death of my mom's grandmother, that death was also a mother who emerged almost immediately. And when I read those questions, and that question in particular, depending on where I am in life, different mothers emerge. And so I'm thinking about how the two of you both write in deep relation, it seems, to family, and in both cases, the mothers. I'm still thinking about these words of yours, Diana, where you say, only after she guts her catch does the kokani yield its clutch of eggs. And also these words of yours, Cindy, in the mother's voice. But trust me, I loved you more than I had loved you. And in another poem, and if you have loved, then be early, even earlier, to the after-death ceremony, end quote. So I'm thinking about the fish, to me, as a mother. I mean, that image, it took my breath, who does not yield those eggs until after it is gutted. I'm also thinking about your brother and siblings as co-makers or mothers of the text, maybe, like the images after the brother takes out his image and after his suicide. I'm thinking about the beloved mothers, the poet as mother to the text. So my question is, how are you thinking of mothers, seen and unseen, to the text, mothers of the text? And also, maybe more than nouns, I'm wondering about actions. What are the mother actions you all have questions about in the book? What compels you about the mother actions? What possesses you? If any of that touches something.
I don't have an answer yet.
I think of the book so much as like a sort of poetics of complicity, and of power and luck and all these things. And so part of my understanding of that mother action is like a difference in the power for me, in the imbalance, like in the language or in being born a U.S. citizen and sort of displacer, and I can go to North Korea, and I can go to Palestine, so like the sense that there's something unlucky sort of about the mother action that is like preceding what is experienced as luck to me or to the next person. And I also think that complicity is exciting. It's interesting because there's also an agency in it. And so I think it's a way of also mothering narrative to feel more in charge or sort of aware. That's what I could think of. But I think that also there's like friendship and all these things that make a life in writing possible, and that are super important to me. But my mother also is, I guess, a mother to whatever I write, and whatever I sort of want to write, and the gaps in that space. Yeah.
I just wanted to add in Cindy's book too, you're working with like mother's dialect of English too. And so there's also like speech of the mother that you're like tendering and also responding to, but of course like crafted in poem form. So this part I can answer right away, which is always working with just like the archive. Like literally, I always like, I don't like that white page. I guess you can make it black if you wanted, high contrast. But I always stick a picture in there, like a watermark, and then I make it kind of semi-opaque. And then it's just like, okay, something's on there. It's nonverbal, and I don't necessarily have to have it's like, you have stuff on your desk, right? Whatever your altar is, the books that you're reading, your objects, your crystals. But I do that in like the Word doc, right? And of course, it's like it's influencing the words that I'm choosing for sure. Like it of course. And almost always I just remove it at the end, right? But for a long time, for all of those versions, it's there watching me, watching it, so that the archive is there, which is to say, like, I'm trying to think a lot about like lineage, who's not here. Yeah, so I think about all those things quite literally. And then this was the part that was hard. I was like, action. I was like, what is the mother action? I don't know. But I do know, actually, and I have forgotten that kokanee line. I mean, I remember it because in the pandemic, I started ice fishing. I think there's a theme. But there's a kind of regret that I felt. It's like, oh shit. Like, all these potential, like, it's like, oh, it's dead. And like, the potential of the eggs, it doesn't get to kind of continue its journey. And I think a lot about my mother and her inability to understand like mental health, her own, my brother's, mine, etc. But she's a computer scientist, right? So she like tries to think in like patterns and algorithms. I'm not saying the right words maybe. So after his death, she kind of like, she does different things. I'm thinking about too, like rituals, things that we do for luck. She wasn't doing this for luck, but she would find parenting books from the local library and read them. She did this for a long time in secret. And it was not until maybe a couple years later that she's like, Diana, you need to have a child. And I was like, not going to happen. You need to have a child. And I read this thing and it said, you need to do these things and also feed them eggs. And I was like, okay. She's like, oh, I don't know, like eggs are good for the brain or something. And it broke my heart. It was like, she's reading these parenting books. Is that okay? Can you hear? Okay. Oh, okay, yes. I can hold it like an ice cream cone, but I won't lick it. That she was reading it, but I'm not telling you what she also said, which is she's like, oh, I did everything wrong. Right? She's like, oh, I thought that like you just have kids and then you just figure it out. I didn't know that there were like people could give you advice, and I wanted to be like, well, actually, now that I am also a parent, it's like all the books kind of say contrasting things too, depending on when they're written. So you're like kind of effed always. So I think of that as the verb, which is this kind of sense of like feeling like it's too late, but still somehow trying to prepare for the thing which already happened. If that makes any sense. I think of that as like the mothering verb. Because now that I'm a parent, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do all the time. I'm trying to get ahead, but I think I'm still always behind. But I'm alive, right? And like, I'm going to just be and try. So, yeah.
Do you want to answer too? I'm so curious.
I don't know. I'll think about it, but I mean that, but no, I think I don't. Or I'll think about it. I was gonna say it leads me to this other question, or not even a question, but this quote of yours. And I'm not trying to if I think of something else, I'll share it. I'm not trying to hold back, but You were talking about this Kim Hae-soon's poem that you translated, and you describe her work as, quote, a poetry of present aftermath, and then later annihilation but not completed, of the past yet also ongoing. And I was thinking of that quote in relation to another question, but I feel like I just want to bring that up here because it feels like when you were talking about time, or when I'm thinking about also this, there's something about this sound work that both of you are doing, and also I'm thinking of like these like reverberations of like near sounds, like where I might imagine you might say thing, you say think, or this happens a lot, and I'm thinking about like the reverberation of some of the images. But there's something about time as material, the time and the tide, and just that, a poetry of present aftermath. And you're talking about Kim Hae-soon's work, I think, but I wonder if that means something to you all in terms of your own. Yeah.
Definitely. I think that a lot of those sound plays and overlaps and things like that, which it happens a lot, because there's conscious ones and there's unconscious ones, like letters being dropped in the middle of words and things like that. And I think that must be because I learned English, as going to school. So I didn't speak English until I went to school, and then I didn't really speak until I really could speak it. So I didn't speak for a long time, for several months, and then suddenly I was speaking in full sentences. So I was sort of studying and watching. And so I think that certain commonalities are not being thought about. And the sound ones are very interesting to me, including when it doesn't make sense, why always bothered me, why is it stomach and then spinach? Just create a system, and then either it's spinach or spinach or whatever. So I think that's where that's coming from, and then there's an aftermath of that because the language is already sort of exploded or questioned, and I think it is this aftermath, but from the having power side in a way. In the Palestine poem, it's like we're going around and are doing all these things, or I don't know, it didn't go to my grandfather, to see my grandfather because of my school schedule. I didn't want to miss finals or whatever. Whereas she was in this position of dealing with censors and was the intermediary between writers and the government. And it was, at one point she was slapped 7 times, and then she wrote 7 poems in response, and I translated those for that book. So the aftermath is sort of you're living and you're being slapped, and then you're having to act like everything's normal at your job. And I think for me, it's more of being in the position of having the awareness, but less sort of in the less being acted upon, maybe. But definitely for you, Diana, I see the present aftermath as well. I think that's a good phrase.
As you were describing, I kept thinking in the aftermath, as if there's shrapnel everywhere. You have all the bits and the fragments of what had come before. I tell this story often, but it's just so central to my imagination, and also just logic and cognition. In 2nd grade, Southern California, we walked to the school assembly, and there was this one boy. He would take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and he would just march like that, and he was just counting to himself, just kind of singing. And I was like, what an inefficient way to walk. I was like, oh my gosh. But now I think I'm still thinking about him, and there's a way in which I'm always checking in the past, in the present, just my surroundings before I continue to go forward, if that makes any sense. And of course, my parents are doing that, but they don't have language for that. They just in their language, it's literally just future tense always. Things that we should do. There's not even just like, congratulations on what you are in the present. It's just future. But I'm like still, and I don't know if it's just my generation or just even my family, but I'm like still halfway 2 steps in the back. Especially after like catastrophe. It's like we're searching for signs of what. There was another thing when you were making your observation that I was going to remark upon, but now I don't remember. Oh, relating to language and mishearing. So I also learned English when I started going to school, but I didn't know that. I thought English was my first language, and it wasn't until I watched home videos that like 3-year-old self is like just talking up a storm in my dad's Southern dialect, you know, and I was like, what? Who's that? You know, and I'm like, wait, that's not me. And then it's like, okay, shit. Well, okay, I understand what happened. And I was like trying to get back to that. Like, how can I just like return to the language that I can translate at home but not speak? And actually, like the semester that I found out I was pregnant, and we were not trying to get pregnant, and we were actually told we couldn't. I was taking Vietnamese classes, you know, like the older woman in the back of the classroom with the nursing majors and the pre-pharm majors. I know. I felt such love towards them. And something about being in that space and trying to reacquire language gave me like a third relationship to the language, which was neither the 3-year-old self nor my parents. You know what I mean? It's like that, I think I was talking about that, the in-between space. But after giving birth, I could just talk to my parents in Vietnamese. Wild.
Wow.
Wild. So like going back and revising, but also writing some of the poems. I was like composing half in a hybrid, because it was like my brain would like think about the word duck, and then I was like think about the Vietnamese word, and that brought me somewhere else, you know? So it's like there are 2 linguistic possibilities opened up so many more terrain, so much more terrain to kind of play with. Like, I'm gonna just start saying spinac now. Yeah.
Like Brindle.
It's the right age.
It was this book about, someone says, how does language work? How do words get invented? And the teacher is a sort of, well, what I would now say is a prescriptive dictionary person, where she wants it to be you follow, she didn't believe in the word ain't and funner and stuff. And then the student says, well, if language is just made up, if other people made up words, I'm going to make a word. He pays all these people to go and buy a pen, point to the pen and say, I want a frindle. So then they know what it means. That's how language works. And then he like fights, and then at the end he gets it in the dictionary, and the teacher's like, well, I just was being a villain so that you could reach your goal for the story. That's my memory from early elementary.
I love it.
It's so, I mean, to go back to your, I don't know what the mother action is for me, but I do something about this, like, conversation, and I don't even know that I could trace the root, but one thing that I'm thinking about is, I think since having my kids who are now almost 9 and almost 7, and also living through my dad's death and the and lockdown and having kids, this realization that I had always understood my mom's grandmother's death. She was like this matriarch in the family, and she died really young, and she was a matriarch really young, and I thought that it had ended. I thought it was a death that ended, and when I had the kids, I realized this is an ongoing emergency. We are still in the emergency of it. And I also think that Christina Sharp's, in The Wake, the way that she helps me, taught me, teaches me to think about afterlives of slavery, that we are in the afterlife, the ongoing afterlife of slavery, helped me to better ripple my time and think about time. So I don't know what the mother action is, but I do think about that ongoingness, which also makes me have new questions about ongoingness of not death too, which I'm trying to train my eyes to see the ways that they are in the materials.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Anybody have questions, comments?
Hi.
Well, your books share obviously like the titles. There's like a word in common. So I'd be curious to hear you guys talk about the maybe word in the context of your book. Maybe I'd love to hear you guys talk about your titles of your books and I don't know how they interact.
Yeah, we both have 2-word titles, word toward and root fractures. My title was what made me able to like make it into a book and not sort of a pile of poems. And it's really hard to say. So you will, I mean, if someone asks you what you did tonight, you could say, oh, I heard these poems from word to word. Everyone always says, what? Because it has so much, I mean, it sounds like W-A-R, it sounds like W-O-R-D. Is it to-ward or toward? So I guess it kind of, and I didn't really realize that until I had to say it out loud. So I really love the title, and I think it folds in a lot of things and also maybe folds in what has to sort of be understood as text and is not as easily encountered in speech.
I love Cindy's title. At first I thought you were like, why did we choose our combined social media account name, which is like a portmanteau of our 2 book titles, which I kind of really love. I feel like, what is it? I don't know. Transformers? I don't know, they like combine together and they... Okay, I don't know what that is. Okay, so I had a really hard time titling. I'm still not sure, but oh well. You know, I love roots. But I think what came first was I was really thinking about fault lines, you know. But I didn't want to be like, oh, like earthquakes, you know, it just... And then this is during the time in which I became obsessed with I can never say this word, mycorrhizal network, which is like all the roots together, so many species. It still blows my mind. So then I just like, okay, I'm just gonna think about roots, and I don't know. I really don't remember what happened, but it's printed, so it's done. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Not teeth.
Oh yeah, but my editor, this is why I like him so much. He's like, Diana, he's like, I just spent a lot of time looking at x-rays. It's a like dental term, root fracture. And he's like, we considered that for the book cover. And I was like, I'm down. I didn't think about it, but I've got dentists in my family, you know? Yeah, painful. Hopefully nobody here has root fractures. That would be really bad, yeah. I forgot.
I have to look that up now.
Yeah. Angie.
I have a question for Diana. I remember in Ghost of, I really loved how you had several poems titled Gitaku, several poems called Triptych, and then I heard this time you had more than one poem titled Cape Disappointment. I'm wondering if you could talk about that practice of like, just different ways of inscribing an obsession, different ways of looking, and how you think about reusing the title in your poems.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Angie. And the question was a noticing of recurrence of the same title across different poems, both in the first book and then in this current book. I write serially. I think it's also the nature of like I write in these like bursts of period, which I've done with at least several people in this room, which is like I write in 17-day bursts. And it's like hard to write a new poem every day. So if you're like, I'm gonna pick up a thread from this Cape Disappointment poem, you know, so that's quite literally what's happening. But also like nothing feels, I just want to continue. That's just its own impulse. And then in this book, I was like, how boring if we just put long 30-page poems back to back. You know what I mean? I mean, I would be bored. I'm bored just thinking about it. So it's like, half of them are going to go, and which fractures, right, which fragments will remain, and how do they interact, how they tessellate. I think there's only like 4 titles in the book. I don't know. It was just, yeah, but I was just like, why not? You know, like, I don't know. That just seemed fun to me, you know? I don't, yeah.
Oh, we have time for one more question. Maybe I'll ask a question. Unless somebody, I don't want to hug, but I'll look up. If anybody has one, just stop me. Yeah, I guess another question is about like poetics and sensibilities of your befores, or, you know, poetic lineage, but also not necessarily only looking towards the poets.
I'll just start. Yeah. I'm obsessed with Jenny Erpenbeck, German writer. Quite specifically, after the first book, I was like, I'm going to force myself to write the longest sentence I ever could. It's like holding your breath, like, you know, holding your breath to train. And I was like, how do I do that? You know, I don't know clauses, you know. Okay, so I was reading a visitation. No, it's just called Visitation. Visitation, Jenny Erpenbeck, translator Susan Bernofsky, just like gobsmacked. I was like, what? You know, and I wish I knew German. I wish I could read it in the German. And so I could do the scaffolding exercise where I would just like take her long sentence, and she's like, she does this clause, I'm gonna do that clause, but I'm gonna pour in my own content. And I would just keep doing it, like, you know, following the blueprint until like the content of my own poem takes over, and then I have to, you know, and then I'm like, oh, bye, thank you, Susan, you know, thank you, Susan, thank you, Jenny, you know. So that's a huge one for me.
Yeah, and you did that also with Mark Levine, right? Yeah. And then, so yeah, I love those exercises too, because they become, sometimes you can see that, and sometimes it's totally, you can't remember that that's where it came from. I didn't have so many direct, it wasn't so much poetry, it was more about like dialect and confusions of language for me. And then I had been reading like different manuals and things like that. And also, you know, a lot of my friends are always telling me that they're constantly having diarrhea. You know, like a lot of my friends are always talking about their diarrhea and their stomach pain. And, you know, I just don't have diarrhea or really even fart unless I eat dairy. And I feel like there's this issue where people don't want to maybe acknowledge that they're lactose intolerant. And so they're just suffering in this way and like really struggling. And I know, like, if I am having problems, I know I can, you know, locate that. I can say, oh, that cheese, or this thing had that thing. And so I feel like there's like a reading version of that too, where like sometimes you're always like, you can feel, or it's like that pinched nerve or something, like you can feel when it's the right thing, and you can also find that even when something sort of feels good and like you want to tolerate it, but you are gonna have diarrhea and you're not gonna want to like share that or publish, you know, like maybe it's good for an exercise, but it's not what you want to do. You want to have those amazing solid poops, you wipe, there's nothing there. It's good for you. So I think that sometimes I do feel like the input output, I do try to track if something is like messing with me in some way, more so than like what's like really working for me. Yeah.
Wait, how do you know?
Like, well, I'll have an SPD, silent but deadly, art, and I'll know which dairy came from. So I'll do the same thing with my writing, where like maybe I get stuck with a certain kind of, or like I read someone and then I felt like, oh, that's a poem, and then I'm like not letting myself make what I need to make, or like, you know, someone criticized something that I did and then I sort of like overcorrected, you know, like those are the things that I feel like, for me, it's not about like finding the right things, it's about not doing the wrong things in terms of like reading and exercises that are for writing. and like, or at the very least locating it and being like, oh, that's from this, or like I'm responding to this, but it's not me. It's just like you are just as capable of like also doing the non-wiping proof safe toilet paper, and yeah.
I know we have, yeah. Should I ask? I mean, I'm thinking just really quickly about the Kim, like your translation work, and something that we talked about just before we started, which is like editing work, and this question that I had, which is like, how do I hear myself when I'm hearing so many other people in the editing work, which feels like a gift, and also like there's a practice that I have to find to hear myself. So I guess I'm just wondering, maybe you already said it with the tissue paper and stuff, but I'm wondering if, if there's like a way that is it just that it's shit when it comes out, or is there a way that you know that this is there a way that you can attune yourself to when you're not hearing what you should be hearing or doing what you should be doing?
Well, there's that Nabokov thing of like things coming to him as like a ball of fire, and then he just needs like it's whole, and then he just needs to write it down or something. And I do feel like that's the best feeling, of course, when it feels like you're a vessel and it's just happening. And then other times you're like cobbling, you're like, oh, maybe this could, like it's like you're just trying to like fit things together in a way. So when things are that first category, I think then I'm like, great, like something's sort of fitting. Editing, I do think like, because when I'm teaching, I feel like that's for me generative. Not like my students' work inspire me, but just more just the idea of like centering poetry. And editing, it is a little different, I think, because you are giving in a different way, and you're also reading with a different mind, thinking about like what things could be, or like caring for where people are and wanting to like also support them to where they're going. Yeah, what do you find that as well with teaching or with editing friends, that you have to balance the voices and write in a different way?
I mean, yeah. Like, it's like you're just folding everything into the family, I think, of the text. I'm sorry, I was like not prepared to respond to a question, because I love this metaphor of like autoethnographic scatology as like a way to like trace or divine like lineage, and influence, and like, of course it's a product, it's like writing is a byproduct of what we're ingesting. Anyway, I just can't get over it, so I'm just still sitting with that.
It's a product, and you know what my TikTok famous cousin says? That she said to me once, I was complaining about something, and she's like, I know exactly how you feel. Because she's richer than the nurses, the teachers, and her family. She said, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because I am also a content creator, and we're the two content creators of the family. It's so humbling. Oh my God, this is content? That's it's a product, and it's, I guess to someone it's content. There's a table of content. Yeah.
So on that note, I think we'll close for now.